Niagara, Game of the Year 2005. With George, Gina, Charlie, and Rose. When they open the box, the players find a game board and the playing instructions, as well as 10 canoes, 12 transparent river discs, in each case 7 paddle cards in 5 colors, a cloud, a lifebelt, and gems. Charlie has already begun with the preparations. He turns round the box top and bottom and places them with their open sides down. The game board is placed on the platform to form 2 waterfalls at one end. Gina and Rose distribute the gems on the 5 discovery places on the riverbank. They place 7 gems of the colors that match each of the discovery places. Then they place the cloud on space 0 of the weather track. Meanwhile, George has begun to place 9 of the river discs in the riverbed. They cover the river from the rope near the landing places to the waterfalls. The uppermost riverbed spaces remain empty. George places the remaining 3 river discs next to the box. Now each player chooses a color and takes all 7 paddle cards and both canoes in his color. George chooses yellow, Rose red, Gina green, and Charlie brown. Everyone holds his cards secretly and places his canoes on the landing place. No, Charlie, not on the first river space. That's right, all canoes are starting on the beach. And the lifebelt, that is the marker for the starting player. The player who is most afraid of water gets it. That's George. In the first round, he is the starting player and places the lifebelt on his round space on the game board. Now everything is prepared. The game can start. The paddle cards. Each player has 7 paddle cards. 6 of these show a number from 1 to 6. The player uses the number cards to move his canoes. The 7th shows a cloud. The player uses the cloud card to influence the weather. At the beginning of each round, all players simultaneously choose 1 card and place it face down on its designated rectangular space on the game board. The player whose turn it is turns over his paddle card and completes his turn. At the end of the round, the cards of each player that are lying face up form discard stacks on their respective spaces. In the next round, each player's card has to be placed on top of the previous one. Cards remain on the board until all 7 cards have been played. After 7 rounds, each player takes back all 7 of his cards. Moving canoes. When a player plays a number card, he moves his canoes. There are the following possibilities. Both of his canoes are on land. In this case, he may only move 1 canoe. One of his canoes is on the water. He must move this canoe. The player is free to choose whether to move the other canoe too or not. Both canoes are on the water. He must move both canoes the complete paddle distance. The number on the played paddle card shows how far a player may move his canoe. When a player moves both canoes, he moves each canoe the complete paddle distance. You can use paddle points to move your canoes on the river and to load or unload your canoes of gems. Each single movement costs 1 paddle point. It does not matter if you move from one river space to another, or from the first river space back to the landing place, or from the landing place to the first river space. A river space may contain any number of canoes. Players are free to choose the movement direction of their canoes in the river, but are not allowed to change direction within their move. If a player moves his canoe downriver, it is his free decision to move into the left or right creek. But it is not possible to move a canoe upriver from one creek and downriver into the other creek within the same turn. Gems. Gems can be found at discovery places that you can only reach from certain river spaces. To reach the red discovery place, a canoe must be on the last river tile before the waterfall to either the left or the right of the promontory. For the blue discovery place, the canoe must be on either of the two neighbouring river spaces. To reach the yellow discovery place, the canoe must be on the space where the water separates. From this river space, you can reach the clear discovery place. And from this one, the violet discovery place. If there are different colours of gems in a discovery place, the player may choose the gem with which he wants to load his canoe. Each canoe may only contain one single gem. For loading or unloading, you need 2 paddle points. A player must have one of his canoes on the river space next to the space with the gem, and it may occur only at the beginning or at the end of his movement. This leads to the following possibilities. To load and then to move. If you have played a 5, for example, you load a canoe with the gem and then move 3 river spaces. To move and then to load. If you have played a 3, for example, you move 1 river space and then load a canoe with a gem. To unload and then to move. If you have played a 4, for example, you unload the gem from the canoe. The colour of the discovery place does not matter. Afterwards, you move 2 river spaces. To move and then to unload. If you have played a 6, for example, you move 4 river spaces and then unload the canoe at the discovery place that you have reached. You may also unload and load a canoe again during the same turn. For these 2 actions, you need 4 paddle points. If you have played a 5 or 6, you can move your canoe either at the beginning or at the end of your turn. If you have chosen a 4, as shown here, you will only have enough paddle points to load and unload your canoe, but not to move your canoe. The unloaded gem must always be of a different colour than the loaded gem. During the same turn, you may not unload a gem from a canoe with which you previously loaded your canoe unless you bring it to the landing place. The landing place. To win the game, it is not enough for players to load their canoes with gems. They must also bring them back to land. When a player moves a loaded canoe to land, he takes the gem from the canoe and places it in front of him on the table, well visible for all other players. In this case, he need not reach land by exact paddle movement. The unused movement points are lost. The player places the canoe on the beach and may not move the canoe again until his next turn. But is a player allowed to move an empty canoe to land as well? It is not forbidden, and sometimes it could be reasonable, to save a canoe from falling over the waterfall, for instance. In this case, the unused movement points are also lost. Stealing gems. Players may steal the gem from another player's loaded canoe. This is possible if he moves an empty canoe upriver and ends the movement on a river space where a loaded canoe, which belongs to another player, is already resting. The act of stealing costs no paddle points. You may not steal if you have just unloaded your canoe on the same space where you want to steal. A player may not steal gems from his own canoe. The weather. When a player plays the cloud card, he has to move the cloud on the weather track one space up or down. If the cloud is on one end of the weather track, he has to move it in the only possible direction. The cloud remains on its position until another player plays a cloud card and moves it again. The weather influences the river speed. If the cloud rests on +1 or +2, the river becomes faster. If it is on -1, the river will be made slower. Moving the river. All players have completed their turn. Now they move the river. Place additional transparent river spaces in the riverbed, beginning at the rope that spans the river. And how many? That depends on the lowest paddle card played and on the current weather. In our example, Rose's 2 is the lowest paddle card in this round. The cloud rests on rain, so the current weather is +1. You must add this +1 to the value of Rose's card. 2 + 1 = 3. Therefore, you have to push 3 river spaces into the Niagara. All canoes that are on the river float on their river discs with the movement of the river. At the promontory, where the river splits, the discs flow to the left or right, in alternating directions. Should it happen that a disc becomes lodged on the point of the promontory, players should push the disc by hand in the opposite direction to the direction in which the previous disc moved. If, during the current round, players have exclusively played cloud cards, the river only moves the current value shown on the weather track. If the river speed is 0 or -1, it does not move at all. Waterfalls ahead. During the river movement, canoes resting on the river discs can fall over the waterfall into the deep. When a canoe falls over the waterfall, the owner loses the canoe. If the canoe was loaded, the player returns the gem to the discovery place of that color. The canoe remains at the bottom of the waterfall. The owner of a canoe that has been lost over the falls may pay to have it returned. The cost is any gem that the player owns. He places the gem he paid with on the riverbank place for gems of that color, and the returned canoe on the beach at the starting point at the top of the river. A player may only get back his canoe at the beginning of a round, before the starting player turns over his paddle card. And what can a player do who has neither canoes nor gems? He gets back one canoe and does not have to pay for it. If he does not have a canoe but does have gems, he has to buy at least one of his canoes back. Lifebelt. Now the current starting player gives the lifebelt to his neighbor on his left. This player will be the starting player for the next round. Winning. As soon as a player has collected 5 different gems, he wins the game. You will also win if you have collected 4 gems of the same color, or any 7 gems. However, the current round continues until everyone has played. As such, multiple winners are possible.